afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Lowell. I'm the program coordinator for Planet Texas 2050, which is a research grand challenge at the University of Texas at Austin. Welcome today. We're going to have a panel discussion around the climate equity plan of Austin and linking it to the equity and research. And I wanted to start as a tone setter with a land acknowledgement that the program in Native American and Indigenous Studies drafted. So we would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the indigenous lands of Turtle Island, the ancestral name for what is now called North America. Moreover, we would like to acknowledge the Alabama Kusada, Caddo, Carrizo Comecrudo, Coya Wiltecan, Comanche, Kickapoo, Lipan Apache, Tonkawa, Isla del Sur Pueblo, and all the American Indian and Indigenous peoples and communities who have been or have become a part of these lands and territories in Texas. And in recognition of the ongoing and cumulative challenges faced by Indigenous people in Central Texas and globally, we call upon the University of Texas at Austin to repatriate the ancestral remains held by the Texas Archaeological Research Laboratory to their Indigenous descendant communities and native lands, to commit to the active recruitment and material support of Native American and Indigenous students who currently comprise fewer than 0.2% of UT Austin's student body, to support the transition of the program in Native American and Indigenous studies into a center, and to establish a protocol of research and study on tribal or native lands, and to foster an ethics and practice of engaged scholarship within for Indigenous peoples and communities locally and internationally. So Planet Texas 2050 is which I said before, is a research grand challenge at the University of Texas at Austin focused on making the state of Texas more resilient. We have two principal tracks. One is interdisciplinary research, and the other is societal impact. And we started a series called Resilience Roundtables in 2019 that was focused on the former, on interdisciplinary research. So gathering researchers from across the campus from all different schools together. And in the kind of rebranding of this series, we wanted to focus in sharing information across not just the campus, but across the broader community. And so we are starting this series to do that. And I wanted to share the format for today. So this is kind of a capturing document for wanting to make this event as interactive as possible. And so we have the run of show here. So then we have the questions for the panel. So anyone, I'll share this link in a second. You can add any questions you have here. Any ideas or thoughts that come up can go here. We also, can see this as a networking opportunity. So if you want to add your information, you can do that here. And any kind of stray thoughts or resources can go here. And to start, so I wanted to introduce our moderator. That's Dr. Miriam Solis from the School of Architecture, who is on the leadership team for Planet Texas 2050. She is a assistant professor at the School of Architecture, has a deep engagement with environmental justice and participatory action research. And I will turn it over to her. Thank you, Miriam. And thank you all for being here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jonathan. Good to see everyone. If I have any connection challenges, please let me know and chime in. You just never know. Sometimes Zoom works really well. And for me recently, I've been having some problems. So just please give me a heads up. So before getting started, I want to thank you, Jonathan, for guiding us in a land acknowledgement and providing event context. And before diving in, I also want to thank you for serving in your community liaison role and for planning the event itself, from conceptualization to coordination. I'd also like to give Heidi Schmalbach, Planet Texas 2050, a shout out. So she plays a critical role in cultivating interdisciplinary research initiatives, many of which involve collaborations with community-based organizations, city agencies, and other critical entities working in the environmental arena. And I encourage everyone here today who's interested in learning more, becoming involved, to reach out to Jonathan and Heidi. So the title of today's event is Linking Equity, Research and Implementation, Climate Planning in Austin. And the word link in the title is very intentional. Responding to the current climate crisis requires an all hands on deck approach. And many of us know that, as evidenced by the registration list. More than 8 UT Austin schools are represented here today. Also here today are people from environmental organizations, state and city agencies, firms, and even a few faculty from other campuses. So I extend a big hearty welcome to everyone here today, as well as gratitude for sharing in this space with us. In addition to climate action requiring an all hands on deck approach, we know that this work is very urgent. The actions leading to climate change and climate change's current consequences have been very harmful to communities, especially Black, Latinx, and Indigenous ones. This is why people on the front lines of responding to climate change and researchers from many fields are responding the alarm on the need to consider disproportionate climate impacts and responses. In my own field of planning, for example, many studies have shown that municipal climate action plans often fail to address equity meaningfully. Austin is among a handful of cities trying to do things differently. Today's discussion will focus on the City of Austin's Climate Equity Plan, which has set the ambitious goal of achieving net zero community-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. The Climate Equity Plan will shape policies, programs, and other urban plans, such as those in the area of transportation and water, for decades to come. And the final plan includes 17 goals that are supported by 74 specific strategies. Creating it involved a 10-month planning process. Many UT Austin affiliated faculty, staff, alumni, and students participated in that planning process, including UT Austin's own Director of Sustainability, Jim Walker, and Department of English Professor Heather Hauser, both of whom I believe are here today. Thank you for joining us. So the plan's goals, level of engagement, and community-driven approach make today's event a unique opportunity because we'll be hearing from 3 people who held very important roles in that process. So without further ado, I'll be introducing our panelists. Zach Balmer is the Climate Program Manager at the City of Austin's Office of Sustainability. There he leads the City of Austin's climate program, providing strategic direction to meet the city's goal of net zero community-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. Zach has been with the City of Austin since 2011, with prior experience working in the environmental consulting industry, primarily assisting large industrial clients with environmental data management, greenhouse gas inventories, and sustainability planning. Zach is a LEED accredited professional with an MBA in Sustainable Management from the Presidio School of Management in San Francisco. Zach is a native of Indianapolis and holds undergraduate degrees in chemistry and chemical engineering from Purdue University. Celine Rendon is passionate about sustainability, education, and racial equity. She is the Texas Project Specialist at EcoRise, where she supports the utilization of GIS mapping and data visualization to build coalitions at the local, state, and national level. And she works to identify strategies for effectively serving historically marginalized communities. Prior to joining EcoRise, Celine was the Community Engagement Specialist with the Office of Sustainability, supporting the development and community involvement of Austin's Climate Equity Plan. Celine has a BS in Environmental Science and a Bridging Discipline Certificate in Public Policy from the University of Texas at Austin. We're really proud of you, Celine. In her spare time, Celine enjoys film photography, gardening, and DIY projects. Shane Johnson is the Sierra Club Lone Star Chapter's Clean Energy Distributed Organizer. primarily supporting community pressure to transition cities in Texas to be powered by clean, renewable energy, as well as leading organizing at the state level to fix the Texas grid. Shane was the lead organizer for the hashtag Fix the Grid People's Hearing that provided a platform for Texans to tell leaders what they lived through during the February blackouts. He also led a town hall and rally on fixing the Texas grid. Recently, Shane served as a co-chair of the steering committee of the City of Austin's Climate Equity Plan, propelling a shift in city planning to center racial equity to begin addressing climate change's root causes like systemic racism. Outside of his day job, Shane served as a volunteer on Austin Justice Coalition's policy team that helped win crucial and unprecedented victories in Austin to fight against police brutality and for systemic criminal justice reform. Shane grew up in North Austin and Pflugerville, trying to practice the ideal of working in your own communities first. So we're going to hear from the panelists for about 15-20 minutes, then we will engage in a Q&A. And I encourage all of our participants to chime in the Google Doc or chat as we move forward, because we're really excited about hearing from the panelists, but we're equally excited about the reflections and questions that everyone here today has. And we'll go ahead and get started with Zach.
Great. Thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for everybody coming to participate and listen and learn and ask questions today. I'm going to share slides and go through some slides really quickly, just to get everybody on the same page about the Climate Equity Plan. So this is the cover of the new Climate Equity Plan. This plan was adopted by City Council and the Austin City Council in September of 2021. Prior to this, there was our City Council has been acting on climate change since 2007. The prior climate plan was adopted in 2015 and set a goal of net zero community-wide emissions by 2050. This plan was on a 5-year revision cycle. So in 2019, me in the office, me as the project manager, my team at the Office of Sustainability, and over 100 community members started the process and the journey of revising this plan and updating it and creating a new version of a community-focused climate plan for our city. One of the most important distinguishing factors of this plan and of the process was centering equity and the commitment to equity. The City of Austin established an equity office about 6 years ago now, and the City of Austin has begun this journey of understanding equity better and incorporating equity, the history, community voices into everything that we do at the city. So when it came time to start revising this plan, we started asking lots of hard questions of ourselves, the community asking us hard questions about how are we going to align these goals of eliminating disparities that can be predicted by race in our community with the goal of eliminating the use of fossil fuels for energy and transportation in our community. And at first, when you think about traditional environmental stakeholders and equity stakeholders, people weren't on the same page about this. So we went through a series of conversations and trainings and workshops and lots of discussion about this. And essentially came to the point that you can't really have a climate plan that's not addressing racial equity, because the core root issue that's causing both of these systemic issues is one and the same, of exploiting people and exploiting the environment. And so we came up with these, because this can be sort of hard for folks to conceptualize how large these issues are, we came up with these 7 values in the center that the whole process valued, and essentially tried to center all the solutions and strategies and everything we came up with in this plan to address these 7 topics for all people living in the Austin community. And the bottom line on this, that I've really come to understand as a government official, is that if we're not proactively addressing equity and thinking about this in a proactive manner, we're just perpetuating injustice. Because in our community in Austin in 2022 right now, injustice is just sort of flows downhill. So this was our centering principle. Another really key thing about this plan is we updated the target. The initial target adopted by council in 2014 was net zero community-wide emissions by 2050. We updated that goal to aim for net zero emissions by 2040. So moving that forward 10 years makes it dramatically more aggressive with this very steep reduction curve here. And the plan participants thought that this was necessary because of the global urgency of this problem, of the progress that's not being made at a federal level and at the international level, and more needs to be done sooner. So this is just the basic breakdown of where the greenhouse gas emissions come from in the city. We do this inventory every year. Bottom line, energy in buildings, so electricity and natural gas used in buildings is the largest source, which is quickly shrinking because of Austin Energy's renewable energy plans. Transportation is then the second largest and soon to become the largest sector of emissions. And then there's some smaller sector of emissions. So we have been reducing emissions over the course of the last decade, but we have massive work to do as a community to pull these emissions down and meet these targets. So as Miriam said, we had a steering committee formed. We had 5 advisory groups that worked on crafting everything in this plan as a collaborative effort between community members and city staff to create everything in this plan. So I'm just going to very quickly highlight on the sort of summary topics that are in this plan. The entire document is like 100 pages long, so there is a lot more detail than just what's here. So there were 4 cross-cutting strategies that were identified when we put the whole plan together and made it all fit as one. So these fit across everything in the plan. So green jobs and entrepreneurship, prioritizing local community initiatives that are already in our community, regional collaboration, because this doesn't stop at the city boundary, and then local carbon reduction, offsets, carbon dioxide removal. Just the acknowledgement that we're going to need to be pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, not just reducing emissions long term. Then, as Miriam said, there are 5 sections in this plan. There's 17 quantitative goals, and there are 74 written strategies. And then there is even more detail in the strategies about specifics about how this should get implemented. So the first section, there are 2 sections here on transportation, because transportation is really one of the hardest sectors to reduce emissions from. So the first section is transportation and land use. There's a very aggressive goal there highlighted, focusing on trying to get to 50% of trips in Austin being made without a single occupancy vehicle. We realize we're not going to get every single car off the road in the next decade. Transportation electrification powered by renewable energy is coming very, very quickly. So trying to aim by 2030 to have 40% of vehicle miles traveled on the road by the end of the decade be EVs, and have that ownership be culturally, economically, geographically diverse within the community. And then there are 3 other sections. So sustainable buildings, so trying to get to net zero carbon buildings and reducing emissions from existing buildings. Food and product consumption, which is a new category for this type of plan, where we're looking kind of upstream beyond waste initiatives. The goal highlighted here is on government, institutional, commercial purchasing. There's 2 other goals focused on food and focused on circular economy in that section. And then the last section is natural systems. Climate plans in cities traditionally have really just focused on emission sources, but we, really acknowledge that, the city, between its park system, wildlands, local agriculture, there is a massive capacity and opportunity for natural systems in our community to pull carbon dioxide out of the air. So, we want to enhance those natural systems, not only for ecosystem benefits and water benefits and health benefits, but also for the ability to support more carbon sequestration in our community. So that's just a super quick highlight of generally what's in the plan. And now I'm going to hand it, I think, over to Celine to talk a little bit more about the process.
Thanks, Zach. Hi, everyone. I was the community engagement specialist joining at the beginning of the climate equity plan. And I was right out of UT, as Medium mentioned, but I had kind of work previously that built up to that moment. A lot of my background when I was an undergrad was focused on my work with PODED, People Organized in Defense of Earth and Our Resources. It's an environmental justice group based in East Austin. And having someone like Susana Almanza be my mentor, and all my experiences that led up to this moment of being a community engagement specialist, and what does it mean to operationalize racial equity in a city planning process. So it was really exciting, and I was eager to take on this work because I haven't kind of seen a city planning process like this before. Going in, understanding that if this is going to depend so heavily on community involvement, who are key community leaders here in Austin that need to be in these discussions, who have created definitions of racial equity in our community and have done the work. Because as we know, with the history of the city of Austin, much like the history of UT, there is a lot of harm that's been done related to systemic racial segregation, lack of investment, historical neglect, and that kind of manifests in different ways from an institution like the city. So understanding that, like speaking with community members, being really active in getting folks involved. We have Shane here, who is one of our steering committee members, but we also have someone else here. Give a quick shout out, I see in the comments, to Kenneth Thompson, who is also a key leader in our steering committee, who is like the overseeing body of the climate equity plan. And so this was an entirely new space for me, and I think for the people that were coming together that worked across different organizing spaces as it relates to racial equity, as it relates to land use development, and then bringing that as a liaison with city staff, and trying to encourage people to you have to trust the process and understand like this is something new, and hopefully you can kind of trust me to like kind of facilitate that and assist in bringing this collaboration to life. So really proud of all of the involvement we had across the city of Austin with our steering committee, our 5 advisory groups. And also, with that collaboration, I think, which we'll get into more later, of how it made the plan what it was, the journey of it, and the memorable moments of really hard conversations that we had to have, getting on the same page, having shared definitions, having a shared understanding history of environmental justice issues in Austin. And as that relates to what we see now related to affordability, land use planning, climate planning, and all of that. But we'll be jumping into more on that side of the community engagement part. And I'll kind of let Shane give a brief overview about the climate plan from his perspective.
Thanks, Celine. Good to be here, everybody. Shane, he, him pronouns. I'm with, as I said earlier, organizer with the Sierra Club. Yeah, it was really an amazing process to be a part of and help lead. I served as one of the 3 co-chairs of the steering committee. And now I can't quite remember if we talked about the structure. So we basically had, so the Office of Sustainability was the staff manning the whole process, and then behind, or working with them, was the steering committee of community members, and then the steering committee guided 5 advisory groups that did more of the nuts and bolts and the meat of drafting things, while especially at the beginning, the steering committee helped finalize those 7 equity themes that Zach showed in his presentation, that encapsulate the intersections of racial equity with addressing climate change. And then the steering committee drafted a racial equity tool and analysis for the advisory groups to use to review all of the goals and strategies that they initially drafted, and say, hey, is this a strategy that is helpful, neutral, or harmful in terms of equity? Because we can't just be equity or race blind or colorblind, and in terms of our approach and how we, and the strategies we're using to address climate change. And that was, like Celine was alluding to, there was a lot of long discussions on all of that, and a lot of, I think, really fruitful learning as well. And a central part of that was, say, for example, if one strategy was neutral or even negative in terms of racial equity impacts, but could be very beneficial in climate, we really challenged ourselves to say, how can we rewrite this strategy or pair it with another or some others to then not be harmful in terms of equity and really do the best job we can in terms of mitigating climate change. One thing I really want to emphasize in terms of framing is that the climate equity plan is not just a climate or environmental plan. It is first and foremost a racial equity plan. That is the core of it and the foundation. And it's a racial equity plan that is geared towards addressing environmental crises and climate change, not the other way around. It's not a climate plan that then has equity added into it. And I think that approach and that intentionality was super, super crucial to having a successful climate plan in every sense of the word. And I think it was alluded to a little earlier, but racial equity is, or let me rephrase that, white supremacy and systemic racism, which are kind of two different ways of referring to the same thing, is one of the main root causes of climate change. And so if you aren't actively addressing white supremacy and systemic racism in your climate plan, then your climate plan has failed and it will not truly address climate change, period, full stop. And so we had to come to that shared understanding, which was, for some folks, it was a longer journey than others. And then we really prioritized community leadership from advocates and community leaders who've been doing that sort of work and have that deep understanding and have shown it for many years. And then just looking at brief notes and another crucial piece, and I think it's so important that we highlight that we know our history that led us to this point and made the foundation that made this climate equity plan possible, is that once the city of Austin had established their own equity office, then they've been doing trainings for every department on sort of the foundation level understanding of what is equity and racial equity in particular, and why we have to address race as one of the root causes, because race is a defining characteristic of how our society functions and is the root of, or is at the root of so many harms and inequities in terms of quality of life. And so from there, then the city of Austin contracted with an organization called the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond to do regular anti-racism trainings called the Undoing Racism training. And in my experience, that's been the best anti-racism training I've seen. And so doing that for city staff now for several years. And then on top of that, and all of that was just the foundation, I'll say, for the Office of Sustainability to start to do the climate equity plan, right? To start centering equity from the beginning. And then after that, the Office of Sustainability hired an anti-racism consultant named Dr. Tane Ward to train every single participant of the 5 advisory groups and the steering committee and Office of Sustainability staff to make sure we're all on the same page of not only what is racial equity, but what are specific examples of white supremacy and racial oppression, systemic racism in the Austin area. How does this intersect with and weave through environmental issues? And then how can we use that knowledge to inform and our processes and our climate plan? So that was over 120 people trained, doing 8-hour trainings on top of all the previous trainings I just mentioned. And all of that work is what it takes just to set the foundation for a climate equity plan or any sort of equity plan. So we have to understand the layers of dedication and hard work that we have to commit to in order to actually prioritize racial equity on any sort of large scale or any sort of governmental process or things like that. So I'll stop right there. But yeah, that's really important for that. That's how you start to actually prioritize racial equity.
Yeah, great framing, Shane. Perfect. And I think too, just to wrap up this overview part, is that we did not go outside looking for consultants from like Chicago or for California. all of the participation and the facilitators and anti-racist organizers are people that we met with, spoke with here from our Austin community. And I think just stressing that, emphasizing how we have so much of this genius and wisdom and leadership here in our community. And these were people that have been ostracized before by the city, or have been folks that push against the city historically all day, every day as organizers. And these are the same people that we're like, we need, our leadership that we have to like listen to. This is what we are doing for this climate equity plan. And I think that's what we kind of are all coming to, like, that's what made this experience what it was, because we got to contextualize it so much in our local Austin community with our local Austin history, and understand how this also applies not only to here, but other other major cities and states throughout the US. So I just love that piece of it.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that, Celine. That's really crucial, especially we're trying to do a racial equity plan centering people of color in communities in Austin. And I can't emphasize enough how frustrated and often angry communities are with City of Austin and other places when they hear they contracted a consultant from across the country and spent several $1 million with the idea of practicing something good for the community, and that is inherently detrimental in many ways. And so, in the same vein, Dr. Chane Ward, our racial equity consultant, has lived and worked in Austin for decades. He himself is Indigenous, and so and has done so much organizing around Texas as well. And so, having those characteristics for your consultant and having them connected to the community is of the utmost importance.
So thank you for providing that foundation for actually diving into the questions. I had a few questions prepared to get us going, but you all are really already providing some great ones. So we're going to dive in. I do want to welcome, without putting you on the spot, Mr. Thompson, I'm going to welcome you and a couple of others who were involved to also chime in and responding to some of these questions, since you've all played a very active role. So we'll work off of the Google Doc, and which, if anyone needs, we'll be reposting it in the chat, but also feel free to message Jonathan Lowell for the link. Oh, hi, Jim. Jim also played a very important role as a member of the steering committee. Certainly for our panelists, these are familiar faces. The first question is, considering the limited footprint of Austin in comparison to the metro area, is there collaboration or an initiative to work with surrounding cities or within the country?
Yeah, I guess I can jump in on that one. So I guess across the country, I mean, we are connected with other cities across the country primarily through this group called the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, USDN. But that is primarily like a information sharing. We listen to each other, we learn from each other, we copy from each other. Like we're constantly reaching out and learning across cities across the country. And, you know, that's how, honestly, I'm connected with the folks who are trying to do my job in San Antonio, in Dallas, in Houston, El Paso, the other major cities that have climate and sustainability staff. The challenge that when you get down to the, you know, the ultra local regional level, like suburban cities, you know, that we found over the past, 10 years of working on this is that those smaller cities, suburban cities, don't tend to have staff and resources. They don't have a dedicated climate person. They don't even usually have a dedicated environmental person. So, even if you put in the call, we've gotten connected with elected officials in, cities like Round Rock, San Marcos, other places. There's not anybody to help. There's not anybody to work on it. So we struggled in this area, right? Like the city is connected regionally through CAMPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is kind of a political organization that's around, that's set up to like spend highway dollars. And then there's CAPCOG, which is the Regional Council of Governments. There's a clean air focus with CAPCOG, and we participate and communicate with CAPCOG. I've tried to make the sell to other elected officials from surrounding communities on climate change. And this is where we immediately like hit these political cultural boundaries of urban priorities and rural and suburban priorities. And it's really challenging to get folks motivated and at the table and working together. So that's not to say that we're not going to keep trying, keep reaching out and trying to bridge these gaps, but those gaps are real. Yeah.
Thank you for your response, Zachary. And so we have a lot of questions we're working with. I'm going to encourage our panelists, to the extent that it makes sense, to chime in with comments if possible. Otherwise, we'll stay focused on the Q&A, and then perhaps we'll use the document to circle back through future interactions and collaborations. So the number 2 is a question I've actually been asked because I was a committee member, and frankly, at the time, I didn't know how to respond to it. So number 2 is, I think, one that is a question a lot of people will have. How is progress on climate equity being measured? Is it lower emissions, improved quality of life, stricter zoning, environmental regulations?
Yeah. Well, the primary way is through the 17 quantitative goals that are in the plan. I mean, those are all quantitative measures on community-wide outcomes that we're trying to achieve between now and 2030. So that's the primary way. The secondary way will be the actual like output measurement. So is the specific thing that was recommended in the plan being implemented? Is it being funded? Who's managing it? How far is it to being implemented? Like, has it been achieved or not? And the way that will be tracked is there's a implementation tracking website that we're standing up right now and are going to make public. So, you can interact with the plan in a lot of different ways. Like right now there's a high level version, and then there's this really long PDF with all the details. Very soon there's going to be a story map that's sort of like an entry level step into understanding like what the plan is and what's in it. And then, on the other side of really wanting to understand implementation, this implementation tracking website should give everyone, the transparency that they want to see about who's responsible for things, if things are funded and to how much, and hopefully be able to use that information for, accountability purposes with boards and commissions and with city executives and with city council. I think transparency and clear reporting and measurement of not only the outcomes but also the outputs of what is directed in the plan is key, and is going to be kind of the way that we move forward with that.
Yeah, thanks for giving that framing and synopsis, Zach. A couple of dimensions to this is, so what Zach was just describing towards the end of what he was saying, I think maybe a point of confusion, and something that I was personally confused about earlier on, was that this climate equity plan is basically our goals and vision document, but it's not how we implement these goals and visions. We do have the strategies of how we can get there, but there's nothing in the plan about how we implement those strategies. And so the quote unquote implementation plan is an entire second plan that we're now just gearing up to develop, is my understanding. If Zach knows city stuff way better than me, so if I am misspeaking in any way, feel free to correct that. But so going forward, we still have the entire implementation plan to create and to implement. We did have some sort of equity accountability I think, measures in the council resolution where they adopted the climate plan. And in general, particularly with racial equity, to meet your goals and vision, or to carry out your goals and meet your vision, you need you need to have accountability to the community. And so really good community engagement, particularly for Black and Brown folks who aren't normally included well in city work, is essential to making sure we are centering and carrying out racial equity and fighting white supremacy, fighting systemic racism. I will say, and also on a point I often hear is like, we need to lower emissions for racial equity. And that's, I think, a common misunderstanding that we need to nip in the bud. Emissions reduction is not racial equity in and of itself. And that's, I think, a misunderstanding that many people who have worked in emissions reductions or solely in environmental work have. We can reduce emissions all we want for decades and do it in a very racially inequitable way. And that is detrimental, and that will prevent us from significantly mitigating climate change. And so, sometimes I like to say trickle-down climate reduction or trickle-down carbon emissions. We don't want that, and that will be harmful because it will waste our time and resources, and we all know we have precious little time to fight climate change. So we have to really be centering racial equity and how we even think about reducing emissions and then the actual work to carry that out.
Thank you. So so we have actually many really great questions. And because I want to make sure we're able to get through as many as possible, I'm gonna put forth two at a time and actually see if any of our three panelists can answer them or would like to share their reflections on those specific questions. And again, I welcome other climate equity plan participants to chime in. So how does the city intend to equitably distribute EVs? EV price is not controlled locally. Will the city of Austin financially support EV purchases? Another one that was put forth is, while awareness of climate change is up, actions do not seem to be following suit. If the general populace does not value investing in fighting climate change, municipalities will be limited in what they can do. How do we get people to prioritize fighting climate change?
Well, the second question, I mean, that is the question. I mean, that's been the question for the last 20 years, and that's going to be the question going forward, is that, this is not, government cannot make all the decisions with this. This is, there's this combination between what is public policy, what are individual residents doing and individuals, how are they making decisions? And then sort of how is, technology and solutions that are available sort of coming along, and how do all those things fit together, right? Because you can build a bike lane, but if nobody rides their bike in the bike lane, it doesn't matter. So that's the ongoing challenge of communication, of engagement, of designing solutions for people so they want to use them and want to take those actions. On EVs, potentially financial support for EVs, that was, that's one of the potential strategies in the plan. There's lots of other ways that could potentially happen too, like EV sharing programs, EV leasing programs. There's a lot in the plan around charging infrastructure, because obviously we don't control people's individual choices to buy electric vehicles. And there are state and federal incentives up to like $10,000 a vehicle now. But we do have a lot of control and a lot of input on charging infrastructure in the city, because as the owner and controller of Austin Energy, there is a lot that they sell the power that's going to charge all these EVs. So there's a lot that can be done around charging infrastructure and making it simpler and easier and accessible and cheap, so that, you know, for the equity benefits, that those benefits of zero polluting, lower cost to run the EV, you know, better for the individual and save the individual money. So that actually gets to the people that need it the most, and not to, you know, only high income folks in the community. Celine, do you have any ideas on the action motivation question?
Oh, yeah, I wanted to add to it. And oh yeah, thanks for letting me share my screen. I wanted to talk a bit about our Community Climate Ambassador program. That was one of the biggest things that came from this plan, biggest thing that is also kind of being operationalized across the city. If I could just kind of share my screen a bit to put some faces to the names. When we were doing this climate plan, as mentioned, we had 5 advisory groups, we had a steering committee. We were also wanted to include a new method of engagement to try new things that people across Austin have been asking for, kind of honing in on the wisdom and knowledge of organizers in our city that can't necessarily participate in a form like a advisory group, but with, you know, more boots on the ground, more active in their community, have different methods or non-traditional ways of engaging people in their community as it relates to organizing. So we developed this Community Climate Ambassador program where we selected 12 folks, selected 12 folks. They were compensated and paid to facilitate their own community climate conversations, and had full freedom and range to design that in any way that they kind of saw fit, as well as include our support along the way as we facilitate. But for the most part, just kind of boots on the ground sent out. And these are the folks that are shared on my screen right now that participated with us from our application process. Like, we definitely got the right people to participate in this pilot program. And this report is available if you want to read more, but just people here in Austin engaging their community in different discussions as it relates to sustainability, affordability. How can families get involved as it relates to like their climate impact? But also, why are those conversations oftentimes exclusive or ignore different identities and community groups? It's not that people ignore or do not want to participate in making the environment a better place. Again, it comes back to systemically how communities are designed and how communities have been neglected or left out, or purposely left out of these conversations. And so I really loved this ambassador program because we got to talk about cultural experiences as it relates to sustainability and how people of color historically through our culture have been involved in sustainable practices, have been involved in cultivating the earth in appropriate ways, have been on the front lines fighting these very issues that are just now starting to impact everyone, as we saw with the winter storm. That it's not just people on a specific geographic area. Like nowadays, it's everyone. But if you think back to communities of color, low-income communities, frontline communities that have been experiencing these things, there's just a lot to learn and a lot to gain from. So I would really encourage to kind of switch that narrative. And I feel really proud of this ambassador program for the folks that helped us co-create this program and to give us that insight. And we're straight up honest with us, and we wanted that feedback. We wanted that advice from these folks, and not to do things in such a stale city way of doing things that, engagement from the city is not always the best. So I'm really, or fun, and I'm glad that we got to do something new and exciting and bring these narratives, to the forefront and share with our participants. But yeah, this report, I love it. It's available online. And I would also love to, Kenneth, if you want to add to this question from your perspective. You've been involved in the climate space for a long time, so I'm sure you have a lot of great.
Yeah, well, first of all, to the three of them, kudos to you. I mean, I'm here, because of you three. I mean, because of the work that you guys done. I think when I think about this whole thing, I go back to some things that Zach and that said, Sean, we also, at the initial part of this whole process, right? You got to get people to start feeling like they have value and that they have a stake in the game. And what tends to happen when we organize, and all you good people with good hearts, good intentions, and all those things, right? Hell, you organize in the same space. And then you come to me when it's done. And hell, I don't have no interest in being an afterthought, right? And so I do believe one of the things and I think I've told Zach this and that, this for me being, and I am a lifelong Austinite. So I mean, I've been here all my life. This climate equity plan that they put together, the thing that I value the most about it at the beginning, where we were always uncomfortable. See, some of some of my white brothers, because of who you are and what you are, so you may never have the experience being uncomfortable because you have always been the one who's dictating the conversation. And Zach, and to you guys, I think you guys did a fantastic job of setting up the conversation where everyone can be comfortable. I mean, comfortable and uncomfortable speaking their voice. And if you really want people to get involved in anything, right? Well, they got to see if there's a stake in it for them. And it can't keep coming from the same people keep telling me, it told me yesterday that I need to get involved, but hell, you done all these things to me, but yet you still want me to get involved. Well, we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting some people to have a different approach. And I do love the fact that, again, this approach was and I think when you brought Alberta there, you brought Gilbert there, you brought some folks who there, we had been in some fights a long time ago, and our voice was never heard. And so talking to us and not at us really matters. And so I think that's one of the essential parts of this engagement. And then also, like Celine, that I thought first, your energy, young lady, was just absolutely powerful. And I think your willingness, right, to step out and to be bold, planted a lot of seeds in terms of helping to cultivate, where we are today. And so I think it all starts at the beginning. And the beginning says is that you have to be much more inclusive, and you have to be that way. You have to be that way intentional. You just can't think about, well, let's go get this person, because get some of the people who's going to make you feel uncomfortable. All right, because if you want everybody to sing the same song, then you're going to get the same thing.
Thank you both. And Mr. Thompson, you're touching upon something that we talked about leading up to the event, which is the climate equity plan's connection to longstanding local and even national environmental justice movements. And so the climate equity builds on a legacy that's been there. And I think you did a really—
I can just tell you this, look here, I can tell you that as an 8-year-old kid, playing Little League baseball in Austin, Texas, and I would guarantee that my kids, my friends who grew up in Northwest Austin or somewhere, never ever had this experience. Playing on a baseball field, and you're looking up where there's now all kinds of junk coming out from the incinerator. See, the incinerator used to be in our neighborhood also. So when you think about environmental injustice, right? See, some of us have lived it. And what happens way too often here in Austin, Texas, you don't hear about our voices. You don't hear about our voices. But there used to be a incinerator that are in our community. That's what we lived and breathed every day. And not only we live and breathe, hell, we played in it. And because no one told us the potential damage that stuff could have on us long term, we're trying to catch the stuff. We're trying to play with it. And so we are actually playing with stuff that perhaps will kill us or have a detrimental impact on not on us today, but on our future, on the future generation. And so that's why this conversation that we had about this, and I was so glad that they included the word equity, and it was intentional, and it made some people uncomfortable. However, the broad conversation was more also very inclusive, and then also we were just going to leave some people behind because I think we had also decided collectively as a community, but this was the best thing to do. And sometimes, you know what, making other people and other systems uncomfortable is not a bad thing. If you're going to improve the quality of life for those people who you advocate.
Thank you for sharing those responses. So I want to, we have so many great questions, and I'd love to hear our panelists' responses, but we only have 5 minutes left. So I'm gonna put forth one more question, and then allow for any final reflections from our panelists based on the questions that they're seeing and the people in the room. What this clearly demonstrates is that 1 hour was not enough to dig into the climate equity plan, and the potential collaborations can emerge from these conversations. So we're mindful of that, and Heidi, our Planet Texas 2050 director, is taking notes so we can continue to think through about how to develop these conversations. So the last question I'll put forth is one that certainly my field is thinking a lot about, the urban planning field. What role has gentrification played in the climate equity plan? How can we implement climate equity when the economic system our city runs on works counter to those goals?
So I get another hour for this question, right? Just kidding. And actually, I'll spotlight the previous question too, or the question where we're asking, if the general population doesn't value investing in climate change, what can cities do? How can we fight climate change? Because these two questions are really tied together from my perspective. And first of all, the general population does value fighting climate change. It's actually not true from all the data I've seen. And in particular, people of color value fighting climate change the most. I think a couple of years ago, a study showed that Latina women valued it more than any other demographic. But definitely people of color value it for every reason that Kenneth just outlined. So why is there a perception that they don't, or why are people of color not engaging in a lot of kind of mainstream environmental or climate change fights? It goes to questions like gentrification, like police brutality, like having an unsafe electric grid, that the oil and gas industry funds elected officials to not fix. All of these things are connected to each other. And it also touches on accountability and trust. Like Kenneth was saying, we have to build trust and work through, and trust works at the speed of relationships. We have to build relationships in the community to have any chance of centering equity or actually practicing anti-racism to fight environmental racism, right? And a huge, huge issue right now, of course, in Austin is gentrification, is displacement. And that's an enormous racism, white supremacy issue. And at the same time, it's a big climate change issue. Are we going to displace, we're talking about, Project Connect was approved, and that's going to, is really important for climate goals, but the core ridership of Cap Metro are working class people of color. And the way things are going, in 2 or 3 years, most of those people, especially once Tesla gets here, 3 or 4 years, we could displace most of the core ridership, where they're going to drive in traffic that's twice as bad and contribute much worse climate or carbon emissions. And if we displace enough people and enough people move here, even Project Connect might not decrease traffic, right? So these are holistic and intersectional issues that we have to be thinking about with the intention or purpose of centering and prioritizing racial equity or fighting white supremacy, fighting systemic racism. And so in that vein, I would say that, and we talked a lot about anti-displacement in the climate equity plan, more anti-displacement measures, especially before big companies like Tesla move their headquarters or open their factory here. And if we don't do that, we're gonna harm people of color, we're gonna harm working class people, and then to add insult to injury, we're gonna harm our chances of fighting climate change.
Thank you for your response, Shane. So we're going to take a few minutes to wrap up. Would Mr. Thompson, I saw you and Mr.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to, all of these things are linked together. they are linked together through American history, right? That's the reality of it. And I think what happens to many of us at times, we want to be in denial, right? And that justification, I mean, it's here and it's not going away. And, you know, so now what it has, the voices of those people who are opposed to it, right? Well, where are you? Where's your advocacy, right? I mean, is your advocacy in the closet or your advocacy out in the public place, right? Where's your advocacy? Because to go back to the question you asked, if you want me to get involved again, right? Well, where's your voice about issues that directly impacting the quality of my life collectively? And so all of these systems are kind of linked together. And I would just say that. And I want to say to my friend, one of the other things I'll say about this plan that I love is about some of the relationships I've been able to develop. I want to say hello to my friend Jim Walker also. I see him here also.
Thank you. Okay, so that's actually a really great reflection to walk away with and to carry as we think about our research and the various initiatives that we're a part of within and beyond UT Austin. Zach, Shane, Celine, are there any final reflections? And Jim, any final reflections you'd all like to share as we move forward?
I'd just like to share, and we talked about this, you know, how this plan was created, and it's a historic moment that we're in around environmental justice issues, you know, this ever-encompassing thing of climate change. But before, like, during this plan development was COVID-19, the death of George Floyd, the death of someone in our community, Ramos, police brutality, issues around the police budget. These are all issues that are happening as well, like during the development of this climate plan. And much like Shane and Kenneth have mentioned, that these are all interconnected issues. And how do we show up for people in our community when those tragedies happen? How do we address the root issue related to our schools within AASD, with beyond that? Issues as it still relates to gentrification. These are all interconnected. And I'll tell you that the people that are fighting the issues related to our schools, related to gentrification, are the same exact people that are fighting for climate change. Those are always the people, those are the people that kind of always have the holistic approach. Those are the same people that understand the power of healing in community, the intergenerational exchange of knowledge from past and present, in the importance of how we center our culture and how we confront white supremacy and how that shows up in our work and prevents us from seeing all of these issues as interconnected. And we talked a lot about white supremacy culture during this plan and that use of either or thinking. And I really do think like it does get scary, but again, it's all interconnected and we have to show up for one another in those different spaces.
Thank you, Celine. Zach, anyone else? Okay, all right. So there was a lot of substance here, and certainly I don't think the moderating or the time did it justice because there's a lot of very important and meaningful ideas that were shared and very important questions that were asked. And those are in part reflected in the Q&A and in the Zoom chat. But I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us. I really look forward to our paths crossing and for us to continuing to forge these relationships over the years to come. So I'm going to close this out. Heidi or Jonathan, is there anything else that you'd like to say?
I was just going to add that this is an ongoing series. This is the first one of what will be an ongoing series. We have the next one is scheduled for February 16th on Resilience Hubs on the anniversary of, or close to the anniversary of Winter Storm Uri. And also just wanted to point out that this will be ongoing, indefinitely, really depending on community interest and input. And so I'm always available to hear ideas or from people on topics, or if you want, or people who would like to participate in future panels. So please feel free to get in touch.
All right, thanks everyone, bye.
Thank you.
Joe.